So when you spoke to Ms. Arias, you spoke to her after she has already been charged with a crime, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the other one that you have is inappropriate intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, right?
Yes.
And in the DSM it says, as an example, frequent displays of temper, constant anger, recurrent physical fights, right?
Right.
You don't have any evidence of recurrent physical fights, do you?
No, just not recurrent physical fights, just the time that she had kicked her mom.
Okay. I'm asking you whether or not you have any evidence of constant anger.
Internal anger, yes.
Okay. And you get that evidence from where?
Her family members who had indicated that this is something that they had seen in her throughout most of her life.
Most of her life?
Yes.
Okay, but you're referring to, and I know you just wanted to throw out there the when she kicked her mom. That's something that happened when she was a teenager, right?
She was younger, yes.
Yes, and that's something that happened when she was arguing with her mom, right?
I believe so.
And you know that she was...
I need to retract that.
Okay, you don't know when it happened?
No, that there was, if I remember correctly, there was an indication that her mother had made a kind, neutral comment to her, and the response was negative.
Okay, that's what your information is?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so then I guess, are you aware that the fact that the time when Miss Arias was a teenager, that her mother would argue with her back, right? Do you know this?
Would what?
Her mother would argue with her.
Yes, she indicated that there was a lot of arguing.
Okay, and that her mother would hit her.
Yes, that's what she reported to me.
But the only thing that you want to take into account is that Miss Arias hit her back.
No,
right?
that's not the only thing I want to take into account.
Well, you're using that as a data point, right?
That she hit her, yes, for that symptom, yes.
And you're using that as a data point for inappropriate intense anger.
As one data point, yes.
Okay. And also, it talks about frequent displays of temper. You don't have that, do you?
Do I have that?
You don't have that as a data point for Jodi, frequent displays of temper?
Yes, that people would describe her as being irritable and upset.
Okay. And they also described her as being very happy, don't they?
Yes, other people do describe her as that.
And being very pleasant and kind.
Yes.
And they describe her as being very caring.
Yes, some people do.
Yes, and describe her as being very loving.
Some people did describe her as that.
And I believe for this criteria, you wanted to use an email from Miss Arias to Mr. Alexander, right? On February 14th?
Yes.
And in this email, she says she's talking to Mr. Alexander, right? Through email, right?
Yes.
And I'm showing you exhibit number 623. And she writes to Travis that she's sorry that the last few days have been frustrating for him, right?
Yes.
And she wishes that she can give him more consolation.
Yes.
And she says that she was at a loss for words, right?
Yes.
And that she's a little bit intimidated. Not necessarily because of his anger, but she wasn't sure how he would react to her trying to comfort him, right?
Yes.
So she's talking about how she's trying to comfort him.
Yes, she was.
And she says that she compares it to her own experiences, that sometimes she doesn't want to hear it, and she just wants to yell and scream and vent, right?
Yes.
And then she puts in parentheses, yes, I do, on very rare occasions, right?
Yes.
And then she wants to go, and that she talks about going through the motions until the situation plays itself out. Right?
I'm still reading.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And she talks about needing comforting sometimes.
Yes.
And she talks about how her heart filled with compassion for Travis.
Yes, she did.
Okay. And when you were talking to the prosecutor about this email, you didn't go through any of this part, right?
I had read that.
Right, not with the prosecutor on direct, right? You didn't tell the jury about it.
Correct. We read the second paragraph.
Okay. And It's clear from the first paragraph that apparently there was something going on prior to February 14th between that Mr. Alexander was upset about, right?
Yes.
Because she's talking about his anger.
About him being frustrated.
Right, and his anger too, right? Because of how angry you were.
Yes.
And then she goes on to talk about, to kind of pump him up, doesn't she? When she says that after she hung up with him, that she continued to cry for a few minutes. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And so she's talking about how she was crying after she hangs up with Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
And that she was feeling miserable and hopeless. And then suddenly she thought of him and she knew that she stopped crying and she began to feel wonderful, right?
Is that what the rest of that says?
Yes. Do you need to read it? Go ahead.
I see the part that you're referencing now.
And she talks about how lucky she is to have him in her life, right?
Yes.
And so saying this to somebody, it would make them feel good, wouldn't it?
They're kind words.
Yeah. And so she's saying kind words to him, isn't she?
Yes.
And she talks about the future and how, talking about she's specifically referencing today's lesson has been difficult and was not fun, but the general idea is that once we learn the lessons, that we don't repeat them anymore, right? She's talking in a very positive manner with him, isn't she?
Yes.
And that she hopes that he feels better and to remember that no matter how ugly it gets, that she's just a phone call away, right?
Yes.
When you went through this email with the prosecutor on direct, you didn't tell the jury any of the other kind words that Miss Arias had to say, right?
Right.
And knowing that you were going to use this email as a data point in your diagnosis to borderline, you didn't talk to Jodi about it, right?
Did I talk to her about?
About the email?
No.
You never asked her what she specifically meant when she talks. The part that you use is that she says that she's never beaten anybody up, but her anger, she's kicked holes in walls and kicked down doors and smashed windows, right?
Right.
And knowing that you were going to use this as a data point, as you say, you never talked to her about it, right?
I don't believe I'd read it at that point.
Okay, so you never went back and talked to her about it?
No, I didn't go back.
You never asked to clarify, well, what did you mean by this, Jodi? How often did this happen? You didn't ask her those questions.
No.
And you didn't ask her then, so you have no idea if what she says in this paragraph is true or not, right?
Just like with everything else, it's just another data point.
Okay, but it's a data point that you used to form a criteria or an opinion about borderline personality, right?
Not independently.
You used it to form one of the things to form your opinion about borderline personality, right?
As one of the pieces of information, yes, I did.
All right, you conducted the MMPI, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is?
It's a self-report measure. There's 567 questions, true or false. It captures personality traits and general psychopathology.
And this was a test that you gave, right?
Yes.
And in this test, you said you computer scored it?
Yes.
And you said you did it twice. Did I hear you say that or no?
The computer makes you do it twice.
Okay. So that's acceptable then to score the MMPI twice because the computer makes you do it?
It's part of the protocol when you're entering it.
Okay, so and which computer scoring company did you use?
This is with, I believe it's Pearson.
Pearson, okay.
I'd have to double check on that.
All right. And do you
It's
have...
called Q-Local.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, it's called Q-Local is the name of it.
Okay. And do you have your, the computer when you put it into the computer and it scores it, it spits you out something like graphs and charts, things like that, right?
Yes,
And you-
T-scores.
And do you have that with you?
I do.
Can you take those out, please?
Sure.
And I'm looking for all the scales. Because you said you did all of the scales, right? Not just the validity and clinical.
Right. So you're not asking for the raw data, you're asking for the score report?
No, right, I don't want the raw data.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be back in the jury room at 11:15, and we will start promptly at that time. Please remember the admonition.
Please stand for the jury.
Counsel, please approach.